guys, welcome back to new video. In this video we're gonna create a translator application. Translator app is used to convert your English text into Hindi. In this application we are having two different input method. Either you can use keyboard to put your English text that you want to convert into Hindi, or you can simply speak. We will capture that voice input and convert that English sentence into Hindi. In this project we will try to learn about bound service, what is the use case of bound service, what is the lifecycle event of our bound service. Pretty much everything that you need to know about bound service you will get in this particular video. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Go to the description box where you can find my initial project GitHub repository link. Download the project and open up into your Android Studio. We will understand what is service in Android. So service is an Android component that we can use to perform our task on the background. Background doesn't mean on the background thread. Background means when your application isn't on the foreground. On that case, your service will continuously executing your task on main thread. Because it is executing your task on the main thread, you can't do the heavy computation task in your service. You can perform a lightweight computation in your service because all of the operation will be executed on the main thread. In this project, we will use bound service. So what is bound service and in which scenario we will use bound service? You can use bound service when you want to perform two-way communication with your service. Your service will become a server and your component will become a client. So it's a server-client scenario. So let's get started with our project. So first I'm going to create my service. So for that we are having a package and the package name is service. In this service I'm having a class and the class name would be translator service. Extend this class with service. In this we are having one function naming onBind. So if you want to create a bound service, on that case you have to return a class which have implemented iBinder interface. So for that on the top I'm going to create an inner class and the inner class name would be translator binder. And this will eventually extend binder because binder class is already implemented iBinder interface, so that we don't have to explicitly implement iBinder interface in our translator binder class. Now on the top I'm gonna create a variable and this is nothing but an object of our translator binder. Now from this onBind function I'm gonna return my binder. Now it's time to talk about the lifecycle event that we are having in the bound service. So first we are having onCreate, then we are having onBound, then we are having onUnbind, and lastly onDestroy. And in between our onUnbind and onDestroy we are having one more lifecycle event which is very important one, onRebind. So onCreate will trigger first, and in this block if you want to set up or initialize your variables. After that onBind will trigger. So onBind will trigger when you attach a new component to your bound service. Next we are having onUnbind. So onUnbind will trigger when all of your client will unbound themselves from your service. On that case onUnbind block will trigger, and after that onDestroy will trigger. Now when onRebind will trigger. So if you want to trigger onRebind, on that case first you have to return here true. Now let's take a very simple scenario to understand how onRebind lifecycle event will trigger. So suppose you have a 10 client and 10 client is connected to your bound service. Now eventually after some time all of your client will unbound themselves from your service. On that case your onUnbind block will trigger. After that it goes to the onDestroy. In between onUnbind and onDestroy we have a very small time window, and in this time window if any of your client will reconnect to your bound service, on that case onRebind block will trigger. So this is a complete life cycle of our bound service. I'm gonna create my function which actually used to translate my English text into Hindi. Function name was translate, and in this I'm gonna pass my English text. In this I'm gonna use MLKit. So in order to use MLKit, go to your build KTS and add this dependency. By the way, this dependency is already present in my initial project. So go to your translator service. Here we have to create a client, and this client is initialized with the help of translator.getClient, and the requirement of getClient is option. So let's create the options. Translator options, it follow builder pattern. In this we are having set source language. So my source language is English and my target language is Hindi. Simply build it. Now use your option in this getClient function. So in order to convert your English text into Hindi, we have to download the machine learning model first. So for that I'm gonna use here client, download model if needed, and if it is downloaded successfully, on that case I'm gonna use my client and use translate function. So this translate function is actually used to convert your English text into Hindi. So pass your text add-on success listener and add-on failure listener. I'm gonna use here callback method. So for that, on the top in the parameter of my translate function, I'm gonna pass my result. So this is nothing but an lambda expression that has an input parameter string and output is nothing. Similarly for the failure, but in case of failure we don't have any input and no output. Now go to your add-on success listener, use on result, invoke it and pass your result. Similarly for the failure, use on failure and invoke it. And yeah, we are pretty much done with our bound service. On the top we are having translator binder, and in this translator binder I'm gonna create a function, and this function is actually used to expose our translator service instance to our client. So this @translator service. Now go back to your main activity. Before writing anything in this main activity, I'm gonna need some permission in our manifest. So first is our user permission for the internet, because we have to download that model due to that reason. Next I'm going to take a permission for the record audio, because we will also take the user input in form of voice, so kind of voice input. So for that we have to take the record audio permission. Go to your main activity and let's begin with our project. So first I'm going to use here permission. Use remember permission state. We have to pass our permission. So for that we are having Android manifest permission and permission for the record audio. In the launch effect, I'm gonna use here key unit, because I want to execute this block only one time. Permission launch my permission request. So this is an experimental API, so make sure to add experimental permission API on top of our on create. Now let's begin with our UI. So in the UI we are having a column, and make sure this column has a modifier which has fill max size. In the horizontal alignment I'm gonna use here center horizontally. In case of vertical arrangement I'm gonna use center. Now in this we are having an outline text field, so we have to use here an state in order to store our outline text field value. So for that we are having a text. With the help of remember block I'm gonna use a mutable state. Initial value is empty string. Now come back to your outline text field value, use your text value. If anything got changed, we will simply update our state. So text value 8. In our outline text field I'm gonna use modifier fill max width, and my minimum lines is 5. Just below to our outline text field I'm gonna use spacer to provide some space, and the height would be 12 dp. Import this dp. We are having a button, so this button is actually used to convert our English text which is present in our outline text field into Hindi. So for that my button have a UI, and the UI says translate. And when user click to the button I'm gonna use my bound service, and with the help of bound service translate function we will translate our English text into Hindi. But for that on the top we require few things. First we have to bind our main activity to the service. So for that we have to create few variables. So first variable is connection. This is an object of service connection. In this we are having two functions, on service connected, on service disconnected. So once our main activity connected to our bound service, on that case on service connected will be triggered, and if it got unbound from that service, on that case on service disconnected will be triggered. On the top I'm gonna create few variable more. So first we are having service, type would be translator service, and I'm gonna initialize this thing with null. Similarly we are having one more variable, naming is bound. So this is a flag, and this flag is actually used to judge whether our main activity is connected to the bound service or not. Now once we got connected I'm gonna initialize my service. So first I'm gonna rename this thing from p1 to binder and simply use it over here. So binder typecast this thing with translator service dot translator binder. We are having one function naming get service, so use this get service. Is bound is true, and when we got disconnected I'm gonna use is bound and set this thing to false. Remove this to do. Now it's a very good time to connect our main activity with our bound service. So for that I will use few lifecycle method that is present in our activity. So first one is on start, and next we are having on stop. So in the on start I'm gonna connect my activity to the service. For that we use intent, pass your context and the component name. So the component name would be translator service class.java. Here bind service. So bind service is actually used to bind our main activity to bound service. And when you are using bind service, on that case your on bind block will trigger first. Now go back to your main activity. So the requirement of this thing is first we have to pass our intent. So simply pass your intent. Next we have to pass this service connection. Pass your connection. Lastly we are having flags. So the main flags that we were using in this project is bind auto create. We are having one more flag which is very important, bind not foreground. So when you are using bind auto create, first it will check if our main activity is already connected to the bound service. On that case it will never reconnect our main activity to the bound service. And when you are using bound not foreground, on that case your bound service will never become foreground service. So if you want that behavior, on that case you can use bind not foreground, but for me I'm gonna use bind auto create. And by doing this, now our main activity is officially connected with our bound service. And when you want to terminate the connection, on that case we are having here on unbind service, pass your service connection. So this is actually used to connect, this is used to disconnect. Now when our user click to the button, we use service, and this service contain a function naming translate. So simply pass your text. So text is coming from text value. Next we are having on result, so this will receive the result. Lastly we are having on failure. So when we receive the result, on that case I'm using my text value and simply update it. Alright, so we are pretty much done with our first type of input, which is user input. One more thing, I'm gonna use here padding. So padding would be 12 dp, and yeah, we are pretty much done. Now I'm going to execute my application. Before executing our application, make sure in our manifest register this service. So service name is translator service, and I don't want to export this thing, so I'm using exported false, and enable is true. Now execute your application. Okay, so simply type hello here, translate, and there we go. So this will eventually convert English text into Hindi. So we are done with our first approach. Now it's time to take the voice input and convert that text into Hindi. So for that, go to your main activity, and on the top I'm gonna create a variable naming speech recognizer. Initialize this thing with lazy block. In this lazy block we are having speech recognizer dot create speech recognizer. We have to pass our context, so use this. On the bottom I'm going to create a function, and the function name is listen. We have to create an intent. Use apply scope function over here, and my action is to take the voice input. So for that I'm going to use here recognizer intent. In this we are having an action name is action recognize speech. We have to put some extra in this. So input extra, we are having few key and values. So key is also coming from recognizer intent. In this we are having extra language model, and the value is coming from recognizer intent dot language model freeform. Next we have to put one more thing, which is coming from recognizer intent dot extra language, and in extra language I'm gonna pass my locale dot get default. So this is for our intent. Now I'm gonna use my speech recognizer and attach my recognition listener in it. So set recognition listener, we have to create an object which is an object of recognition listener. Simply implement all of the functions that we are having in this interface. Remove this to do. Remove this on beginning of speech. So in order to transfer this on beginning of speech to my calling function, I'm going to use here a function. The function name is on start listen. So this is a lambda, and input parameter of this lambda is nothing. Next we are having one more lambda which actually used to transfer our result. So the input parameter is string and output is unit. So on beginning of speech I'm going to use on start listen and simply invoke it. On RMS value, remove this to do. Buffer received, remove this to do. From the on error, on end of speech, I'm gonna use here speech recognizer and stop the listening. In our on result, we will get the bundle. So change the name from p0 to bundle. And if our bundle is not null, on that case, I'm gonna grab my unique result. It dot get string array list. So use this one. In this we have to pass the key. So key is coming from speech recognizer dot results recognition. So simply grab the first item because first item is more accurate. Now it's time to pass our result with the help of on result lambda. So for that I'm using my result dot let and simply invoke my on result. Remove this on partial result to do, on event to do, and we are pretty much done with our recognition listener. Now it's time to start the listening. So speech recognizer dot start listen. In place of recognizer intent, we have to mention our intent, and that's it. So what it will do, it will simply take the voice input from the user. Now it's time to use this function. So go to your UI, and here I'm gonna create a scaffold. In this scaffold, we are having top app bar. So use top app bar. In place of title, I'm gonna use text which says translator. Next, we are having floating action button. So in place of floating action button, I'm gonna create a card, and in this we are having icons default star. In content description, I'm gonna pass null. So when user click onto this icon button, what I will do, I'm gonna create an state naming is listen. Initialize this thing with the help of remember block mutable state of false. So initially I'm not listening. So once we click on this icon button, I'm gonna toggle the value of is listen. So is listen value is listen value dot not. So basically I'm toggling the value of is listen. And when that happen, I will create a launch effect block, and this launch effect is totally related to our is listen value. So if our is listen value is true, on that case I'm gonna use my service dot translate function, and this translate function is actually used to translate our English text into Hindi. So my text is stored in the text value. We are receiving the result in our on result function. Next we are having on failure. So when we receive the result, I'm gonna use that result and simply update my text value state. And once we done with this thing, we will use is listen value and simply say it false. Similarly, if anything goes wrong, I'm gonna update my is listen value to false. In the card, we are having colors. So this color is initialized with the help of card default dot card colors. So container color is totally dependent to our state, which is listen state. So if is listen value is true, on that case I'm gonna use color green, else color red. Top app bar is an experimental API, so make sure to use experimental material 3 API on top of it. And one more thing, simply cut down this UI of column and paste in your scaffold, and make sure to use padding that we are receiving from the scaffold. Alright, so we haven't used this listen function, so let's use it. So go to your launch effect. Here, if our is listen value is true, on that case I'm gonna use listen on start listen. In that case I'm gonna update my text value to start listening. Next we are having on result. So once we receive the result, then only I'm gonna tackle my service. And yeah, we are pretty much done. Now I'm going to execute my application in the physical device, because this voice input is not possible in emulator due to that reason. Alright, so it's working. So when I click to this card, hello, how are you? So sunna shuru karna. This is the Hindi of start listening, which is wrong. So in the on result, I'm making a very silly mistake. The mistake is, first we have to update our text value, and the value is coming from on result. And after that, we will use that value in service.translate function. Now execute your application one more time. Now I'm gonna say something. Hello, how are you? And this time you can see, first it will update our text with hello, how are you, and after that it will convert that English sentence into Hindi, which is namaste, aap kaise hain. So yeah, by using this approach, you can convert your English text into Hindi. That's it for this video. In this video, we saw about bound service and how we can use bound service in our application. So if you like this video, subscribe this channel and also write your comments. When you write your comment, it will give me a lot of motivation to move forward with new tutorials, something new for you. So yeah, you can write your comments. It's very important for me. It will only take 10 to 20 seconds of your time, but for me, it's a big motivation. So write your comment. So yeah, we will meet in our next video where we will discuss something new about Android. Till that, goodbye.